Good evening, everybody. I know it's hard to be quiet for a speech at this time of night when you've had some excellent wine, but let's give it a go. I've been asked to speak for 5 minutes, and firstly I want to thank the Armenian National Committee of Australia for all the work, with Michael and the Board of Directors, and all the special guests that George mentioned, in particular Primate Bishop Navas Aridian, and Saranush Sahakian. I do want to thank you very much for the work you're doing for the hostages out of Artsakh. Thank you very much for that work, and thank you for your speech. Before I get into giving my proper speech, I do want to acknowledge one of the great things about ANC-AU is it's not politically aligned, but it's very, very good at getting politicians of all sides on board. And we've heard from a number of people. I've seen lots of friends here tonight from the different political aisle. But I do want to acknowledge Tom Kutsan-Tonis is here tonight, and Garo Simonian and I were in Yerevan last year meeting up with the President of Armenia, and I gave a speech on the importance of renewable energy to make sure that Armenia had energy independence, because there's one thing when you're surrounded by people who aren't particularly keen on you, it's really important not to rely on their gas, and so no one can stop the sun shining on you, no one can stop the wind blowing, and so we've pushed for the idea of Armenia going 100% renewable. And we used South Australia and Tom's government as an example of where Armenia should be going. And so I just met up with Tom, and hopefully we can put the South Australian government together with the Armenian government. South Australia is leading when it comes to renewable energy adoption and the use of batteries. So Tom, welcome tonight. I also want to acknowledge Mark Speakman, who, the former leader of the opposition, has done some excellent work, has been a good friend of Armenia, and I want to acknowledge Kelly Sloan, who just spoke. Kelly, I've dealt with over the years, and so Kelly, I want to wish you the very best of luck in your role as leader of the opposition. Now, given how Armenians have been dispossessed over the years, I think it's important to acknowledge that tonight we're gathering on Gadigal land. And I particularly want to acknowledge my wife and family, without whom I couldn't do my charity work. So thank you, Leanne, and my daughter Claudia here tonight. Tonight is about honouring our past and securing our future with Armenia. My own past with Armenia, as you just heard, goes back to 1988 when the earthquake happened. I got the very first foreign film crew. And this is independent media. For people of a certain age, young people on these tables won't get this, but when it was the Soviet Union, there was no such thing as freedom of the press. So to get an independent film crew into Armenia when it was the Soviet Union was almost impossible, but I knew the Soviet ambassador in London, and so I managed to get a crew into Armenia, into the earthquake zone. And so the very first footage you all saw of the earthquake zone was the footage that I managed to get to newsrooms all around the world. But much of the footage could not be aired. I remember in particular I was in the satellite room watching the footage as it came in. And I remember in particular this one footage of a cameraman walking into a school. It looked like nothing had really been harmed, but then we realised that nearly all but one child had been killed because the roof had collapsed on the class. And so there was a lot of footage like that I saw that made me realise I had to step up to help Armenia. And so in the days after the earthquake, I worked with the Foundation for Global Broadcasting to organise a satellite link between Washington and Yerevan. And this is way before Zoom and Teams and how easy it was to do videos. So we had to link up the Soviet system on satellites with the Western system, which was not easy to do. But the good news is we enabled expert aid people in Washington to talk to people on the ground in Yerevan. And so the aid that left in the coming days after that was exactly what was needed in the earthquake zone. So that was something that I feel particularly proud of. My first trip to Armenia, I've now been to Armenia many times, and there's a lot of my friends here in the room who are Australian Armenians. I've been so many times there, but back in 1989, I think it's important to remember the past of just how devastated places like, Spitak was. And I went to the country, and you realised that it was so devastated it would need decades to recover. And we're now starting to see the potential of Armenia. And this is why I think that talking about the future of Armenia is so important, because in Armenia you have amazing young people. You know, there's lots of young people here tonight, but the potential of young Armenians, didn't grow up in Soviet times, they've grown up with relative freedom. And I think one of the things I want to talk tonight about is, if we are going to talk about the future of Armenia, we have to talk about the youth. We have to make sure we empower them. We have to make sure we give them the resources and the ability to create the Armenia we all want to see. I think that is extremely important. Now, Armenia has an amazing history, and it's not really known by the rest of the world. And so when we had the situation with Artsakh, I think one of the reasons why we were not able to get the world to step up and stop that was because the world does not understand how important Armenia is. The spiritual, the cultural history of Armenia is extremely important. You know, most people know me for the Rock Aid Armenia version I did of Smoke on the Water with all those rock stars, but I also organised the global release of Mashtots, which was the sacred Armenian songs from the 5th century, because to me that is the most beautiful spiritual music anywhere in the world. And it came out of Armenia in the 5th century. Even today it's really, really exceptionally beautiful, and Hazmik Bagdasarian and Vahan Atsruni did that with me. With the help of Brian Eno, you might be aware of who he is, he's a top producer. In 1989, we released an album of Duduk songs. Now, back in 1989, no one had heard of Duduk, you know, and so we got Javan Gasparian, who was the master Duduk player, to let us put his album out. And so we were able to try and mainstream Armenian culture into the West. And, you know, Brian Eno, I remember when he first came to me and he said, I found this amazing album of Duduk music. And he said it's the most soulful instrument anywhere in the world. Now, this guy has produced U2, Coldplay, and many other top bands. And so when you have someone like Brian saying this is the best music he'd ever heard, you know, he's someone who really knows what he's talking about. But tonight we're not just honouring the past, we're talking about the need to secure the future of Armenia. We all know, and I'm sure we all wake up every morning, you know, as you scroll through social media with dread on what's happened overnight in America or Russia or Ukraine and other parts of the world. We're living in a highly destabilised world, so the importance of securing Armenia has never been more important. So, to wrap up my speech, I want to talk about the importance of stepping up. Stop talking about helping Armenia and actually stepping up and really, really doing something for it. In the diaspora, I've met so many amazing Armenians who do incredible things for the homeland. I mean, really amazing things. And so with Garo Simonian and his wife Amral, we've been working with the Tufenkian Foundation as an example, doing incredible things to help Armenia. The businesses in Armenia have huge potential. I'm sure, how many of you have been to Armenia in the last 5 years out of interest? Hands up. So anyone who's been there, and I've been going since '89, the improvement in society, the improvement in business is enormous. But there's so much that Armenian businesses can learn from us, especially young entrepreneurs. And so there's some really fantastic work going on in that front. You know, at a personal level, I'm still running Rock Aid Armenia. In the last year, I've donated a piano to the school. As you heard, we've got 220 kids there. I've had 2 cannons made, you know, the Armenian instrument. I still need 2 more cannons, I need 3 saxophones, and I need 1 more piano. So anyone who actually wants to help the school in Gyumri, come and talk to me. I need your help. I can't do it all on my own, so I do want some money from you. Garo Simonian and his wife Maral, we've been working together, as many of you know, to build housing for Artsakh refugees. We saw what happened in Artsakh. We can't change the awfulness of what happened there, but we can help people who have come from Artsakh into Armenia. So with the Tufenkian Foundation, we are building housing. So anything you can do to help us on that front, please either come to Maral, Garo, or myself, and we're trying to help the Tufenkian Foundation with that. The final thing I'm going to say is the importance of working together. You know, I started Rock Aid Armenia on my own because I knew David Gilmour and Brian May and all these rock stars, and I got them to help me set up Rock Aid Armenia. But where we really started to go somewhere with Rock Aid Armenia was when I met a guy in Armenia called Ara Tadavosian, who was like the most amazing Armenian. And we decided to relaunch Rock Aid Armenia. And we came across this school that was it was a temporary building that had never been replaced. And so we thought, okay, we found out that everyone who'd promised to rebuild the school had failed to deliver on their promises. So my first advice is, if you go to Armenia and you offer to do something, please make sure you deliver on what you're promising. We pledged to knock down that school and build a new one. And I'm glad to say over 4 days, we were able to raise the money to build a really big, proper school for these kids in the earthquake zone. It was an amazing thing. So the funds for Armenian relief were amazing. They were our key partner. The Medigian family, Ian Gillan from Deep Purple and Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, came over multiple times with me to the earthquake zone to make sure we got the money that we needed. And we now teach 220 kids a year. And we're teaching them Armenian music, because one of the things after the earthquake was there was no music. Anyone who was here tonight, who was in Armenia after the earthquake, you know there was no music. The music died. And so we felt it really important to bring back that music. And that work I did on that is why I've got the Order of Honor from Armenia, which President Sargsyan gave me, which was very kind of him. But the one thing I want to say to you in finishing is we need to create real change in Armenia. If we're going to secure Armenia, we have to think, what are our skill sets that we can take to the country to create the kind of change that we want to see? What can we do personally? But think about who you know within the community here that you could join forces with to go and create real change over there. So for me, I think the importance of doing it with friends is really important. So Garo, Simonian and I are now going over there on a regular basis to identify what we can do, because Garo and I work really well in that regard. So find a friend who you can work with to create the change that you want to see. Because I think there are very few things in life that are more important and more needed than the security of Armenia as a country, and securing the future of Armenia is critically important. Thank you very much for the support.